Good morning. How's everybody doing this morning? You know, it's the Lord's Day, and that's just talk about a few things this morning. And what we're going to talk about is it's an attitude that leads to disobedience. You know, it all starts in our mind, and then it is produced in our actions. And this morning we're going to talk about Jonah, which is a very, very, very well-known Bible passage. And if you'll turn to Jonah Chapter 1, we're going to get as far as we can get in a short time, and then I'll pick up where I left off on Tuesday tune-up. So this morning, let's start with Jonah Chapter 1, and we're going to walk it verse by verse, and we're going to get as far as we can in about 10 minutes or so. So, that being said, let's get into it. It says, "Now the word of the Lord came unto Jonah, the son of Amittai, saying, Arise, go to Nineveh, that great city, and cry against it, for their wickedness is come up before me." Okay, we see right here in the first two verses, it says, number one, the word of the Lord. He has some instructions for Jonah. It came to him. Jonah heard him. Jonah knew what he wanted him to do, because he tells him that in verse 2. Okay, but he notices that great city. So Nineveh was about 500 miles away from Joppa at that point. So now there's a considerable distance that Jonah is going to have to travel to this great city in Assyria called Nineveh. Now, it wasn't no small town. It was not a small town. Number one, it would be like someone in a town of 1,000 getting sent to Birmingham to cry against it, to preach a message to Birmingham about their atrocities, their sins, their wrongdoing. It seemed like a great task, and it seemed very intimidating. But if we'll remember back, you had David versus Goliath, and we saw how that turned out. When God's will was followed, there was success. And here it is, Jonah gets told these instructions to go to this great city, and he doesn't want to go. He doesn't want to go. But the reason why he doesn't want to go is because he didn't like the Assyrians. He doesn't. He had a hatred for the Assyrians. But one thing that we need to understand there is, no matter how much we dislike a group of people or a person, if God tells us to go give them a message, we need to go give them a message. And not the message that we want to give them, but exactly what the Lord has given us to give them. We cannot be fearful when God gives us a message to tell somebody, but make sure that message is from God. And if it's from God, you can back it up with Scripture. Let's go a little further. This is in verse 3. "But Jonah rose up to flee unto Tarshish from the presence of the Lord, and went down to Joppa. And he found a ship going to Tarshish. So he paid the fare thereof, and went down into it to go with them unto Tarshish from the presence of the Lord." Now, we need to talk about this thing right here. We need to talk about this. We really do. We really need to talk about this. Okay, now, number one, you can't run from God. You cannot run from the creator of the earth. You cannot run from the one who spoke the word and the world was created. You can't run from the one who created all mankind and every creature on the earth. You can't run from that. You cannot run from his presence, because the Lord's eyes are over everything. He's everywhere. He's everything all the time. You can't get away from him. But sometimes we, in our human minds, we forget that. We forget that, and we think that we can just run from God. We're going to hide from God. But if you'll think back to the book of Genesis, Adam and Eve thought the same. But as we see, it wasn't true on their part that they could hide from God. But now, if we really sit right here in verse 3, we can find that, okay, he fled from God. He ran. How often sin makes us want to get away from church or wants to make us get away from people who are doing right. When our sin should be forcing us and pushing us to church, to be around people that are doing the right thing so that we can get ourselves right. But oftentimes, it's the fact that when someone does right and somebody's doing the right thing, that's gonna highlight what you're doing wrong if you're the one that's in sin. That's going to highlight that. So therefore, that's why, you read later on, the Apostle Paul tells us, men want to keep their sins in the dark. They don't want to come to the light. Because if they come to the light, their sins are going to be unveiled, uncovered. And then again, once they get uncovered, you got to do something then. You've got to make some changes. Or either that or you're just going to continue in sin. And that's not what you want to do. That's not what we're instructed to do. Either way, let's go a little further in this verse. And as he found a ship going to this Tarshish, you can find all manner of ways to commit sin. You can do that if you want to. And it says he paid the fare. Okay, so he paid the price to keep running. How many times has sin taken us further than we wanted to go and cost us more than we wanted to pay? But yet Jonah, because he's angry, he did not want to go and do what God said do. Now he's got himself in an even worse position. Okay? He's in a worse position now. He's going down, he's spiraling at this point. Even though he thinks, because it says later on in this verse, it said, he paid the fare, he went down into it to go with them unto Tarshish from the presence of the Lord. But, verse 4 says, but the Lord sent a great wind into the sea, and there was a mighty tempest in the sea, or a storm, so that the ship was like to be broken. The ship was about to be torn apart. This whole thing is Jonah's fault because he's running from God. But now, mind you, if you keep reading, you're going to find out something. It says verse 5 now, it says the mariners, or the seamen, were afraid and cried every man unto his God and cast forth the wares that were in the ship. They even threw cargo off the ship. They threw cargo. Now, this was a ship that was carrying stuff to go somewhere else, but they're so scared and they're trying not to lose this boat. They're trying to save themselves, and they're crying unto, everybody cried unto their God. They're trying to save themselves. And if that meant throw off some cargo to save the boat, which is what they were safe in, then that's what they were willing to do. Well, why is it that we can't cast off the things that are weighing us down? Why can't we find a way to cast off those things and do what God says so that we'll be saved? I mean, that's just a thought, just saying. But anyway, let's go further. And it says that, but Jonah was gone down into the sides of the ship and he lay and was fast asleep. Now, this whole thing was Jonah's fault, like I said earlier. But now he done got on the ship and he's laying there asleep. He give him a good nap in. But the problem is, that is what gets a lot of people, even when they're doing wrong and they're not getting any consequences, they think they're sleeping good. Oh, but that's only temporary because the punishment is coming. The consequences are coming. You can ignore reality. You can ignore it all day, but that does not eliminate those consequences, and you will not be able to ignore those consequences when they come to your door. But in this situation, you have, because Jonah has disobeyed God, he's running from God, he's sinning, and it has affected all these other people. One thing that you have to understand is that everything you do affects somebody else. And by that, I mean, look right here. Now that Jonah is running from God, the ship is about to be torn apart. He has literally placed other people's lives in danger because of his unwillingness to obey God. How many times have we done the same? We have put somebody else's well-being in danger because we wanted to disobey God. At the end of the day, we're the one that's going to have to answer for that, and we're the one that's responsible. It's just that simple. We are the ones responsible for our own obedience, not anybody else. Don't let anybody else tell you, well, somebody else can do your obedience for you. No, that's a lie. That is a lie. Point blank, period. You, me, everybody in this world is responsible for their own obedience. Because every tub has got to set on its own bottom. That's what my grandmother used to tell me, and it's a fact too. Because we all have to stand. One day we'll stand in front of the judgment seat and have to give account of our actions, our thoughts, everything that we have that we've done in our lives. We're going to have to answer for. But in this situation, Jonah had put every person's life in danger. And here I am. I've reached the 10-minute mark already, so we're going to try to wrap this up right quick. But now. And he said, so we're in verse, let's see, 5. We're going to wrap it up at 6. So the shipmaster came to him and said unto him, What meanest thou, O sleeper? Arise, call upon thy God, and if so be that God will think upon us, that we perish not. There's a major point right here. Even with our mistakes, we can still draw people to God. God can work through our mistakes. We can't individually, but God can work through our mistakes. So here it is. These were some unbelievers because Jonah was a Hebrew, which we'll get to on Tuesday. We'll talk about that, but we're going to wrap it up this morning at verse 6. Jonah was a Hebrew. So we know what God he served. He served the same God that me and you serve as Christians. So that being said, in this very instance, even though Jonah made a mistake and he was running from God, he put everybody's lives in danger, God uses that very circumstance to bring others to himself. That, ladies and gentlemen, that is the reason why he's God and we're not. It's just that simple. I hope you've enjoyed it. Thank you, everybody, for watching. Thanks for the support, and I will talk to you as we go further in the book of Jonah. Because right now we're still in chapter 1. So we will go the rest of the way of chapter 1 on Tuesday tune-up. And I'll talk to you all later.